He wrote the riffs, he built the songs, and then they paid him to disappear. Jakey Lee got robbed, and the math is much worse than you think.
Like, subscribe. Thank you.
Before 1983, Jakey Lee was just another ghost haunting the bars of L.A., playing in bands that looked good in flyers, but fell apart before they ever left the rehearsal room. He had already walked out on Rat, same with Rough Cut, said they weren't serious, said he didn't want to waste riffs on people who couldn't stay sober or on time. And every night he was out somewhere, drinking just enough to stay visible, hoping somebody with a real phone number would see him play. And then Randy Rhoads died. Ozzy Osbourne was gutted. The band was bleeding, and they needed a replacement fast. Not just anybody. They needed somebody who could rip and did not flinch. No permanent gig for Brad Gillis, but Jake got the call. He auditioned, nailed it, and suddenly he was in. No contract, just promises. He was told that if he contributed to the writing, he'd get credit. If his riffs ended up on the album, he'd get paid like a writer. Publishing, royalties, the works. Everybody said that's how it worked, and so Jake believed it. The pay for the first European tour was $100 a week. It was a joke, but he didn't care. He would have done it for free. He thought that this was the start of something real and permanent. But Jakey Lee was wrong. So now it's 1983. They're holed up at Ridge Farm Studios, tucked away in the English countryside like a band on the run. Ozzy Osbourne was still reeling, half functioning, and Jakey Lee was working like a man who knew that this was his shot. He says he wrote everything on Bark at the Moon, except for that one ballad, So Tired, which he said he had nothing to do, and certainly wanted nothing to do with it. Too soft, too sad, not him. And Bob Daisley was there too, writing lyrics, stitching verses together, arguing over bridges. He said most of the music came from him and Jake. Ozzy didn't play an instrument, but he can hum something and suddenly think it was his. Producer Max Norman backed that up halfway, said Ozzy usually brought the melodies, the rough vocal shapes, but the bones of the songs, those were Jake's riffs and Bob's scaffolding, and that's how it worked. Jake remembered Ozzy being surprisingly sharp at night, tossing out phrases like they were candy, bark at the moon, you're no different, whatever stuck. And Bob, always with a pen, would build lyrics around whatever came out of Ozzy's mouth during those half-lucid moments. But the thing nobody talked about at the time, the thing that Jake only realized too late, was that none of it was written down in a way that mattered. No contract, no signatures, just some nice riffs and trust. And that's where the screw job starts. So the album was done. Jakey Lee had recorded every track, laid down every solo, handed every riff over like it was his signature. The work was done. And that's when they slid the contract across the table. It said, Ozzy wrote everything. It said Jake did not write a single note. It said Jake had no publishing rights, no songwriting credit, and most insultingly, that he wasn't allowed to say otherwise. A little NDA in there for good measure, publicly or privately. It was a gag clause disguised as a signature line. So Jake pushes back. He asked Sharon why the deal was suddenly different, why the thing they promised, the thing that they said, was just now gone. And according to him, she didn't even blink. She said, either sign it or get the hell out. I'll hire another guitar player. We'll even so much as re-record the entire album without you. Just said it flat out like that. And he didn't have a lawyer, nor the time, so he signed. So originally he was promised $5,000 to record the album, with publishing and credits making up the rest. And once he agreed to sign away the credits, they gave him $10,000, a one-time payout to erase his name from the history of the songs he helped create. He called it profiteering, a lowball strategy. Take the jams and cut the writer. So a later estimate for the publishing royalties that he would have gotten for Bark at the Moon, the title track, would have been around $250,000 at the time. That's just one song. That money went to Ozzy instead. Bob Daisley, he took a different deal. He accepted a buyout in exchange for keeping his name on the record. Said it wasn't worth the fight. Jake never even got that option. And still, Jake is insisting that he's not bitter about the situation. Says it was a lot of money, but not worth carrying. But the fact is, he wrote the songs and his name isn't on a single one of them. So now it's November 11th, 1983. Bark at the Moon hits the shelves. Jakey Lee's guitar is all over the record, but the songwriting credits, Ozzy's got all those. Not a word about Jake, not a mention. And then came the tour, 83 and 84. The Bark at the Moon tour rolls across Europe and the US, but something is off. Ozzy barely plays any of the new songs live, just a couple sprinkled in the set list. The rest of the show leans on the first two albums and Sabbath-era material. It's like he doesn't really trust the new stuff, doesn't want to stand behind it. And Jake sees it too, figures Ozzy's insecure about the album or knows deep down it isn't really his. But by this time, Jake is already done being the silent partner. So when it comes time to record The Ultimate Sin, he throws down the gauntlet. He refuses to pick up a guitar until there's a contract. In writing, signed with his name on it. No more of these handshake deals. No more post-recording betrayals. He gets it locked down this time before the first note is played. He learned the hard way. Now, we're in the mid-'80s. Ozzy checked into Betty Ford, and while he was drawing out, Jakey Lee was busy writing what would become The Ultimate Sin. He's alone, 4-track recorder, bedroom studio, built most of the album there, structure by structure, before anybody else had even shown up. And when Ozzy got out, Jake handed over the demos. Bob Daisley came in and helped smooth some things out, but the core was already there. Jake had written the skeleton, again, and then came the recording sessions and the power plays. Producer Ron Nevison walked in like he was running a military operation. First day, Jake shows up late. One day, first day, Nevison wanted him gone. Said they should just can him right there. And so that night, Jake gets a call from Sharon. She's like, be on time. Said Nevison wanted his head. And Jake asked a fair question. How the hell are you going to can me when I wrote the music? Well, they didn't fire him. Not yet. 1986, The Ultimate Sin drops. Jake finally got credit this time. His name was on the songs. But not all the money he was owed. But at least he wasn't a ghost. The album went platinum. The tour was massive, but then it happened again. Right after the tour ended, Jake was out. Fired over the phone. No warning or thanks. According to Jake, bassist Phil Soussan had been angling for his spot the whole time, whispering in Ozzy's ear, feeding him the line that they didn't need Jake anymore. The same Phil that Jake had personally saved from getting canned twice during the tour. But 3 months after Jake was out, Phil was gone too. But the damage was already done. And that was the end of Jake's run with Ozzy. 2 albums, 1 credit, and a career's worth of riffs that made other people rich. And after The Ultimate Sin, Jakey Lee didn't just get fired, he got erased again. This time, he sold off his publishing rights, just handed them back to the Osbourne, said he didn't want the headache, said the money was going through their company anyway, and chasing it was just impossible. So he gave up, walked away, no royalties, no back end. So he still gets paid by ass crap for the songwriting, bare bones payouts, nothing close to what those songs will earn. And The Ultimate Sin, the album that he wrote in the bedroom while Ozzy was in rehab, that money doesn't go to him. So he gets a new band together called Badlands. But then came the 90s, and Badlands collapsed. Jake disappeared, no press or interviews, said he basically just retired from music, but the truth was simpler. He couldn't afford to stay in. He was selling guitars to pay rent, occasionally cashing royalty checks that barely covered groceries. The guy who helped define Ozzy's second comeback, really, and post-Randy sound was broke, out of the spotlight and out of the industry. And then one day, years later, the phone rang, and it was Sharon. Ozzy needed a new guitar player. Zakk Wylde was on the way out, and they were looking. Jake picked up, and he was interested. Just like that, the past was back online. And Jake was in a position at this point where he really could use the money. However, Jake still had one condition. He said, look, I don't even want money, not a dime. Didn't ask for back pay or royalties. All he wanted was his name on Bark at the Moon. As a writer, official credit, recognition that he was denied in '83. And he told Sharon flat out that he would sign a legal agreement forfeiting all future earnings. He just wanted the truth on paper. He said, let's get past that, and then we could talk about the future. So Sharon said she'll call him back the next day. Well, she never did. That was the end of it. No reunion or callback. The same wall he hit in '83 was standing decades later, just taller, colder, and reinforced with platinum plaques. And when the story came out, it made headlines. Rock media just totally picked it up. For a minute there, people remembered that Bark at the Moon did not write itself. And then came the next kick. Shortly after, Jake was uninvited from a Black Sabbath show in Vegas. No warning or reason, just suddenly not on the list anymore. And he said that really stung. He'd been looking forward to it, but he knew what it meant. Even decades later, saying the truth out loud came with a price. By the late 2000s, Jakey Lee was kind of a ghost with a tape recorder. Famous, kind of forgotten, occasionally summoned back into the conversation when Bark at the Moon came up, but he never softened the story. So now, as of 2018, Jakey Lee had said that his royalty on just the title track would have been about $250,000 in 1983. Adjusted for inflation for that time, 2018, would have come out to be somewhere between $635,000 and $2.4 million. Instead, he walks out with $15,000 total, a handshake, and a warning not to talk. And so we find it interesting to sort of do our best to tally up exactly how much Jakey Lee made in his tenure with Ozzy, not counting anything that he might have gotten basically off of the name that he had made for himself. But starting in 83, his initial pay was $100 a week. And we'll say that that increased a bit over time. Tours typically lasted several months, so we'll estimate 3 to 4 months in that first leg. That's somewhere around $1,600 total for the initial tour. Round that up and call it $2,000. That's pretty much the here's some gas money, now shut the hell up salary tier. And then for Bark at the Moon, he was originally promised $5,000 and writing credit. And that's really the publishing. That's where the actual money part kicks in. That's where he could still be making money today. Well, he didn't get that. Got 15 grand flat, no publishing or writing credit. And then he got the ultimate sin. This time he did get proper songwriting credit. After being fired, he sold back his publishing rights for quote-unquote very little money. Still gets ass crap checks for songwriting, but says it's not enough to live off of. So we'll be generous and say 25 grand in total songwriting royalties from ass crap over the years, plus a one-time buyout of the low 5 figures for the publishing rights. Call that 20,000. And maybe we'll be generous and just give it 45,000 from the total Ultimate Sin era. And even at the highest point there, his regular band member's salary generously would have been about $2,500 a week, typical for a mid-level member, not equal to Ozzy or a business partner. And if he toured 6 to 8 months across both albums, then yeah, that would put us around $50,000 total tour salary on the high end. Take all of that, tally it up all together, and he made less than $200,000 for his entire tenure with Ozzy Osbourne. Moral of the story? Playing for Ozzy will make you famous, but you still might be broke as hell. Probably would have happened to Randy Rhoads in much the same way. And say what you will about Sharon, but she made sure that she and Ozzy were filthy rich, even if a few people had to get their buttholes ramrodded lube-free in the process. The real takeaway here? Your wealth level is directly tied to whatever you can get away with. And to my subscribers, thanks so much for being awesome. If you haven't had a chance to subscribe, steal YouTube's subscribe button and smash it an odd number of times. Copyright infringe that like button really hard. Join the family. I want to thank you so much for watching.